Welcome everyone to the Watchlist, Australia's newest investor webinar series for ASX listed companies to pitch to real investors and hopefully be added to their watch lists. You've no doubt created and curated your own watch list of companies you have invested in or companies you're watching for future investment consideration. For companies, getting on your watch list is a big deal. It means they are being watched and have the chance to have you invest in them and follow their journey. Today, we bring together a range of companies that I know are on your watch list or should be looked to be added. Presenting today are Frugl Group, ASX code FGL, Cynata Therapeutics, ASX code CYP, Emyria Limited, ASX code EMD, and Osteopore Limited, ASX code OSX. Each company will present, then management will be on hand to answer any questions you have. So make sure you have your questions ready of management and submit them using the Q&A box on your screen, and we will get through as many as we can. Okay, let's get started. Our first presenter is Kenny Wu, Director of Frugl Group, ASX code FGL. Frugl is a retail intelligence ecosystem that acquires publicly available grocery data, organises it, enriches it, and utilises it to power two independent retail platforms, Frugl Grocery and In Focus Analytics. Kenny, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking with all of you and introducing our company. As you know, a few of us are freshly appointed, the chairman, myself, and the rest of the board as well, to see if we can helm this company into a future step of growth. If I could have the next slide after the disclaimer, David. Fantastic. So this is a quick corporate snapshot of the company of Frugl Group Limited, and this is the team that we have in hand. Our chairman is Mr. Yip, who's a very experienced banker, investment banker. He was formerly the deputy managing director of Hwang Affin DBS in Malaysia and Nomura Bank as well. Miss Kutirath, who goes by Mint, she's the president of the Thailand E-Commerce Association. As you imagine, Frugal's involved in providing retail grocery analytics, both to consumers and to businesses as well. We found this to be a very, very strategic appointment, something that we hope to build upon. So put very simply, our company currently is trading on the ASX as FGL, a market capitalization of 17.2 million. We have 956 million shares on issue. We have quite a few options that are available until 2025. Our CEO, Sean, is a very experienced technology entrepreneur. Actually, he's been helming Frugl for the past couple of years. He's actually single-handedly with his team developed the product to where it is now. So the product that you see in the App Store, the Frugl app, the Android Play Store as well, that was built from ground up, and the whole back office, the whole engine behind that captures everything that is then delivered to the user, was built from ground up by Sean and his team, Alistair and the rest of them as well. So it's been a very, very interesting journey, but we believe that it's about to get even more exciting. It's a journey that we hope to have everyone come along with. So this is a simple corporate snapshot. If I could have the next slide, David. So this is the Frugl that most people know. Frugl is an app. It's available on the Android Play Store. It's available on the iOS App Store. What it does is it effectively allows people to save money when shopping for their groceries and their daily provisions. That is important in this high interest environment. In people are struggling with living costs and needing to find ways to save money. What Frugl does is Frugl captures all the publicly available data on the internet, and it tabulates this data in an intelligent way. It allows you to enter your address. It allows you to enter things like allergens and things you're allergic to. It captures all of this in the background. And if you enter your grocery basket, if you enter your shopping basket into the app, The app will provide you the cheapest way for you to buy your groceries, to buy your provisions. Now, at this moment, we find that a lot of Australians and even people from other countries are struggling with day-to-day costs, day-to-day living expenses. We find that Frugl as an app, its value proposition will continue to grow. The reality is that cost of living will continue to grow up. The economic conditions worldwide will mean that it's going to be a lot more challenging over time. The beauty of it is that the model that Frugl applies is also universally applicable. We can apply what we do in Australia to the rest of the world. In fact, we have begun doing so. If you followed our announcements in the previous months, we have begun rolling out this product with selected retailers and grocers overseas. The one thing that we will add, of course, is that Frugl has a very, very powerful avenue to capture all of this data. We have to be able to capture this data effectively to be able to provide it to yourselves, the consumer, effectively. If we fail in capturing the right data, we will then also provide the wrong data consequentially. So having said that, of course, in Australia, the supermarket chains, you have Woolworths leading the market at 37% market share, and you have Coles at 28% market share, with the rest, Aldi, Metcash at 10-7%. There is a very, very good spread. So one more other business that Frugl involves itself in, if you could go to the next slide, David, if you don't mind, thank you, is that we also run a business called InFocus Analytics. We collect all of this data that we ordinarily already have to collect and to collate, and we analyze all of this data, and we provide this data in an intelligent manner for retailers. We serve publicly, we serve Metcash. There are other retailers that we serve as well in Australia, the large ones, without going into too much detail. And we provide them this retail data. We're able to tell them what their competitors are selling their products for, how often they change the prices. And so this data that we are able to collate is very powerful for the retailers. Yeah. So if I can get the next slide. So data and intelligence analytics is at the heart of everything that we do. The team behind providing this service both to the general public and to the retailers is a very strong tech team. At the end of the day, the reality is that technology is at the core of everything that we do. The app that we provide the marketplace has to be user-friendly, has to be very, very effective, has to be easy to navigate, and has to provide clear, concise information. The reality is that time is always something that we struggle with, and you'll find that people that you'll find that, you know, as we struggle with cost of living, we also, of course, devote more of our time to working and generating income. As a result, we want to try to ensure that this app and this user experience that we provide is as fluid and as concise as possible. And this also goes to apply to the data that we collect in the background, and that we supply to the retailers. Now, if we supply them a whole lot of information that they're unable to make sense of, we find that, of course, the value proposition becomes very bleak. So the technology of how we supply the information to the public and to the retailers is at the heart of everything that we do. But I'm also cognizant of the time that we have, so I'm going to move through these slides. If I could get the next slide. So this is where we intend to take the company, and this is a natural evolution for this business, yeah. Because the industry is huge. If you look at the right-hand side of the slide, you'll find that the industry is relatively huge. Data is a commodity. The reality is data has been a commodity for some time now, and the retail market, the consumer market, is a very, very, very large market. What we find is that in the past, it's okay to sell data. However, now, as this industry, as this business model evolves, we have to sell intelligence. Now, with AI is able to interpret intelligence. In the past, when you sell data, you sell number 3, number 4, or you sell a price point. It's $5, it's $3, but pack sizes may differ. It may be a 500-gram packet of flour versus 300 grams. And you'll find that now with AI, with machine learning, with large language models, we can make sense of the data that we sell. Henceforth, we can sell intelligence. We can sell retail intelligence. The AI model can provide opinions, and this data will continue to become more and more autonomously intelligent without human interpretation. And the human interpretation will progressively scale down as we progress. This is something that we are working on our product. These are the improvements that we hope to roll out on our product. Alongside that, we've seen continuous growth and traction on our product in Australia. At this moment, we have signed on retailers in the Middle East, and we've rolled out a marketplace product for them. Now, we believe in the business can start from any angle. We can start from rolling out a marketplace or start off from providing data. In this instance, we've started out from a marketplace, which means that we can build in the necessary analytics and APIs to capture the right data for us to then provide them the right amount of intelligence subsequently, which is phase 2 of the project. If I can move on to the next slide. So this is a quick snapshot of what we've done, what we're continuing to do, and what we hope to do. I will try to run through this as fast as I can. So the board changed earlier this year, starting with a new chairman, and then subsequently Ms. Kotirath and myself. We successfully secured our first maiden project in Dubai in the Middle East subsequently, and we've been working on it. It's been relatively exciting. We also conducted a strategic placement on the open market, and we raised approximately 1.5 million Australian dollars from investors, and this was conducted at almost 0% discount. We like it. We find that this is a testament to the confidence that the investment community that we reached out to had in the company and the product, and that funds has been deployed for the company to develop this new exciting chapter. I myself was then subsequently appointed, and at this moment, we are looking at rolling out our product in 3 further markets, which we will announce, 3-4 further markets, which we'll announce in due course. These markets, the reason we've targeted them is because we find that they have a more saturated retailer base. In Australia, Woolworths controls 37% of the market, Coles 28%, and Aldi 10%. It's a relatively concentrated market. We're looking to expand in markets where the retailers are more saturated, where independent retailers don't control any more than 7 to 10%, which allows us to then offer the right products. As 2024 rolls around, we will look at striking some strategic partnerships and fully and holistically capturing the entire product as a platform, as you can see, the intelligence as a service, which is effectively the same product, but collectively rolled together and combined. And thereafter, we'll look at how to protect this data properly as we continue to grow. Can I have the next slide? So this is a simple snapshot on the market as a whole, and the use cases for our product offering. We will continue to opt to expand our core product offering, and the reality is that the retail space is truly tremendous and it's truly huge. We have the right networks in place, and I think that a lot of it will come to pass in the coming quarters. But I think I've run out of time at the moment, so over to David.
Over that. Thanks for a great presentation. Quick, a couple of questions coming through. So how do you get paid and who do you compete with?
Currently at this moment, David, the product that we offer to the market, the Frugl app, is actually a free to use product. And we've been very, very, very steadfast in our insistence to not place advertising into the product. If we place advertising into the product, it clutters the opinion. We find that people may think that we are effectively pro one product, one retailer over another. We've been very steadfast in our decision not to introduce advertising into the product. However, the data that we collect in being able to provide this intelligence and information to the end user, we sell it to retailers and we get paid in that form. Yeah.
Yep. And who do you compete against? Is there other comparative apps out there or other products that I know, I understand certainly that each brand has their own sort of shopping product, but do you compete either locally or globally with anyone, or is that the opportunity?
I think at this moment, the space that we operate in is very fragmented. Within Australia, I've come across an app called Gander. Gander was recently built, recently introduced as well. But one thing I will say is this: data is the heart of everything that we do. Bear in mind that we have been operating this business for a number of years now, which means that we have the benefit of collating this data, this price point, this price movement, this price trend, what goes up when, what goes down when for the last 3 years. Now, being able to make sense of this data as we develop this product will allow us to then provide forward-looking intelligence as well to our users. And that's something that did not exist 3 years ago. We were the first on the market, and we continue to evolve at a very rapid pace as well. So the truth is, I think in terms of competition, we operate quite single-handedly at the moment. I wouldn't discount the fact that there are some that I'm not aware of, and more that continue to be developed as well, because the space is truly huge. It's truly an exciting space, and I can imagine that people are not overlooking that fact.
You talk about the rapid evolution of technology and the fact the business has been, or the app in various forms has been around for a little while. Clearly, new team, new focus. Sean's still there, and he's clearly has a strong technical skill along with Alistair, I think it was. What was the attraction, and how quickly do you need to keep moving the technology?
The reality is the technology has been around. Look, the technology evolved very rapidly when AI came on the scene. The reality is AI has been around since 18, 19, 20, and these products have been developed. Generative machine learning models, large language models, they have been developed for some years now. They only burst on the scene this year, truly this year and late last year when ChatGPT came about and OpenAI launched their product, and everyone was in a race to be first to market. But the reality is AI has been around for some time now, and people companies have tried to understand how they can capture their data set as we have our data set to then offer meaningful intelligence, meaningful feedback, meaningful analysis. Now, the reality is that the space is evolving very rapidly. Is it evolving at a pace that we are unable to keep up with? No, it's not. Even AI that people only start to be cognizant of early this year has been around for some years now. And the tech space has been aware that AI was being built out. So to answer your question, it's evolving rapidly, not at a pace that companies can't keep up with. We certainly can keep up with it. Sean and his team have been actively working on evolving the product. It's a natural evolution. I wouldn't say that we need to redesign. I don't think we need to redevelop, but we have to evolve. And it's a natural evolution for products of our type.
As you say, a well-established technology with a refreshed team and new focus. Exciting times ahead, a clear path. So exciting times ahead for the company. Kenny, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It was a real pleasure. And I hope we can do this more often.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Kilian Kelly from Cynata Therapeutics, ASX code CYP. Cynata Therapeutics is an Australian stem cell and regenerative medicine company that is developing a therapeutic stem cell platform technology, I hope I got this right, Cymerus, using discoveries made at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. To tell us more about this important work, Kilian, over to you.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks to everybody for joining today. So yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Cynata Therapeutics. We can move to the next slide, please. So Cynata is a clinical stage biotechnology company based in Melbourne. As David said, we are focused on the development of our proprietary platform technology, which we call Cymerus. And what that is used for is to enable the scalable manufacture of mesenchymal stem cell, or MSC-based therapeutic products. And those products, in turn, can be used to treat a wide range of serious medical disorders with unmet needs. So this is a unique manufacturing platform. And the reason I say that is our platform allows us to make an essentially limitless number of product doses from a single donation from a single donor. And that really sets us apart from other conventional cell therapy manufacturing processes. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. So over the past few years, we've generated strong safety and efficacy data using our products in a range of preclinical and clinical trials. We now have several active clinical programs, including acute graft versus host disease, diabetic foot ulcers, osteoarthritis, and renal transplant. And collectively, those conditions represent a pretty huge addressable market. So it's estimated at about $28 billion annually in total. So there's clearly enormous opportunities for us here, even if we're only successful with a subset of the products that we have in development. The company's well funded at the moment. We have enough cash in the bank to complete the ongoing clinical trials. And it's also worth mentioning that 2 out of those 4 clinical trials are actually fully funded by external partners. So we can move to the next slide, please. So as I said, our currently active clinical program includes a total of 4 clinical conditions. And I'll just briefly mention that we do have other indications that we have preclinical data on, but we're not currently in the clinic. But in the clinic right now, we have 2 programs that are sponsored and funded by Cynata, and they're acute graft versus host disease, which is in a phase 2 clinical trial, and diabetic foot ulcers, which is in phase 1. Then our partnered programs include osteoarthritis, which is partnered with the University of Sydney and funded under an Australian government NH&MRC project grant, and that's in phase 3. And then we have a recently approved new trial in patients who have received a kidney transplant, and that's partnered with Leiden University Medical Center in the Netherlands, and they are funding and managing that trial. Next slide, please. So some of you may be wondering, what are MSCs and why are we interested in them? So these are cells that actually exist naturally in all of our bodies in fairly small numbers. And they're known as the sensor and switcher of the immune system. So they promote an immunomodulatory and immunoregulatory environment. And really what that means is, in plain English, is they calm down the immune system and they basically keep it in balance. And the reason that that's important is that the immune system, we have a lot of inappropriate and excessive immune system responses to various triggers. And those responses underlie quite a wide range of medical diseases. So a product that is able to balance and manage that immune response has many potential therapeutic applications. And that's really where MSCs sit. Next slide, please. So just to explain what is unique about our manufacturing platform, a conventional stem cell manufacturing process involves taking a tissue donation, for example, bone marrow or fat or some other source of tissue, and then isolating the MSCs from that tissue donation, and then growing those cells in the lab, which is a process known as culture expansion. And the reason that's necessary is you don't get many cells from each donation. So for example, you might get about 20,000 MSCs from a bone marrow donation, but you may require upwards of 1 billion cells to treat a single patient. And of course, in most cases, you're interested in treating thousands or even millions of patients. So you can see the amount of expansion that's required to turn 20,000 cells into this number of cells that you need. And the reason that this is a real problem is that it's well established that MSCs actually change when they undergo this culture expansion process. So you can generate quite large numbers of cells, but what you'll find is they start to lose the properties that you're trying to harness and they become less effective. And that means you need to get new donors on a regular basis. But that's a problem as well, because it's very well established that there's a huge amount of variability from one donor to another. So essentially, we have 2 sources of variability and potential suboptimal functionality in MSCs produced in this way. And that's exactly what the Emyria process was designed to overcome. So we use a relatively recently introduced technology known as induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs. And I'm sorry to use so many different acronyms for different types of cells, but I hope you can bear with me. So iPSCs have the capacity to reproduce themselves essentially indefinitely. So that means we can produce an effectively limitless number of cells from a single donation from a single donor. So we completely avoid that problem of inter-donor variability or variability from one donor to another. We then have a patented process to turn iPSCs into MSCs. But because we get our scale at the iPSC stage of the process, we don't have to extensively expand the MSCs once we form MSCs. So we also avoid that problem where you get changes in MSCs as they undergo extensive culture expansion. So in summary, the Cymerus process allows us to overcome the two fundamental challenges with large-scale manufacture of cells of this type. So next slide, please. So I won't dwell too long on this slide, but this study was conducted by Monash University, and it found quite clearly that there are differences in MSCs from different sources, including Cymerus MSCs. But importantly, the study found that Cymerus MSCs exhibit less batch-to-batch variability and less intrapopulation variability. And what that means is variability within a batch. So they have less variability between batches and within batches compared to tissue-derived MSCs. And that's what we would have expected. And this really underlines the premise that we are pursuing here. Next slide, please. So we have a strategic partnership with Fujifilm. It's a strategic manufacturing partnership. So they are our manufacturing partner. You may or may not know that Fujifilm is a world leader in the manufacture of cell-based therapies. Of course, it's a well-known company for other products as well, but they are a leader in the manufacture of cell-based therapies. So this really puts us in a very strong position to kind of grow our own manufacturing capability as we move further into commercial scale. Next slide, please. In terms of our clinical trials, our first completed clinical trial was in a condition called graft versus host disease. And it's worth noting that this was actually the first completed clinical trial of an iPSC-derived product of any kind anywhere in the world. So it was quite notable. Graft versus host disease is a truly awful condition. These patients have terrible symptoms, and unfortunately, the majority of them end up dying within 1 to 2 years. The patients in our trial were treated with steroids but had not responded, and that was the only available treatment at that time. And patients who fail to respond to steroids have a really poor outlook, and they're not expected to improve spontaneously. But we treated 15 patients. 13 of them showed a response of at least 1 grade, an improvement of at least 1 grade, and 8 out of 15 showed a complete response, meaning the condition resolved entirely. The 2-year survival rate was 60%, which is very high in the context of these patients. With standard of care treatment, when they fail to respond to steroids, the reported survival rate is around about 20% after 2 years. So these results were really encouraging, and they form the basis for us to move into a phase 2 trial, which on the next slide is summarized. So this trial has just recently opened for recruitment. This is a randomized trial in 60 patients. It's a global trial. It's already got approval in Australia and the US. We expect to complete recruitment in late 2024 with results available around about the second half of 2025. And of course, we're really excited to build on those fantastic results in phase 1. Next slide. So our diabetic foot ulcer trial, this involves a novel wound dressing where the cells are actually seeded on a dressing that is put directly onto the wound. Now, diabetic foot ulcers are chronic wounds that occur in patients with diabetes. They are very difficult to treat and they often don't heal, and they're then subject to all sorts of complications, which ultimately can lead to amputation of the foot or the lower limb. So it's a very serious problem. In this trial, we're randomizing a total of 30 patients to either standard dressings or the novel MSC dressing. We expect to complete recruitment by the end of this calendar year with results in the middle of next year. And on the next slide, we do have some initial data from the first 6 patients, which is really very encouraging. And what you can see here, this is the percentage of the ulcer that has healed after 28 days. And you can see that in the light blue line in the active MSC group, there's a substantially higher rate of healing after 28 days compared to standard of care. So if we see those kind of results once the whole trial is completed, that would certainly put us in a strong position to move forward. Next slide. So our osteoarthritis trial, as I mentioned, this is partnered with the University of Sydney. So they're conducting this trial, but using Cynata's cells. And it's important to say that Cynata has the commercial rights to use the data from this trial, and that's very important. The trial is being funded by the Australian government under an NH&MRC grant. We've already recruited more than 300 patients in this trial, and we're expecting to complete recruitment around about the end of this year. The patients will then be followed up for 2 years. And the reason for following them for so long is we're looking to show a disease modifying effect here, which means that we're actually not just trying to improve the symptoms in the short term, but actually slow down or stop the degeneration in the knee joint. And if we can show that, if that's successful, that would be an absolute game changer for the treatment of osteoarthritis, because right now there are no treatments that do that. All of the available treatments just manage symptoms, and ultimately patients end up needing to have surgery, including potentially a knee replacement. So this is a hugely exciting trial in an absolutely huge problem worldwide and a huge market opportunity. Next slide. And so finally, our renal transplant trial, this has just been approved by the regulatory authority in the Netherlands. And as I mentioned, this is partnered with the Leiden University Medical Centre. It's a similar sort of model to the osteoarthritis partnership with Sydney, in that LUMC will be managing and funding the trial using Cynata cells, but Cynata will have the commercial rights to the data. So the idea of this trial is patients who receive a kidney transplant normally have to take anti-rejection drugs for the rest of their lives, but those drugs are really toxic. Some of them can dramatically increase the incidence of serious infections and cancer, and ironically, they also cause kidney damage. So these drugs are very problematic. And what we're aiming to do in this trial is that after the transplant, patients will receive MSC treatment, and then the dose of those anti-rejection drugs will be significantly reduced. And if we can show that that does not cause any problems, such as an increased rate of rejection, then that would allow us to potentially reduce or eliminate those drugs moving forward. And that would really be expected to change the outcomes in these patients in a very positive manner. So as I said, this trial is just about to commence, and it's another very exciting one that we look forward to getting results from in due course. And in the interest of time, I think that's about all I've got for you. On the next slide, we do have the standard disclaimer, and then the following slide is just the closing slide. So I'd be very happy to take any questions, David, that may have come in.
Thanks, Kilian. Great presentation. We do have a number of questions that have come through so we'll jump straight to them. How does Cynata differentiate itself from competitors in the field of regenerative medicine?
Right. So it really is based on how we manufacture our cells. And as I mentioned in the presentation, a typical way of producing cellular therapies is to take tissue donations and basically isolate the cells from those donations. It might be bone marrow or blood or fat or something like that. And that means they have to get this ongoing supply of new donors. And that is associated with a lot of variability, but also logistical challenges, as you can imagine. If you were making these products if we were on the market for osteoarthritis, for example, potentially treating millions of people every year, imagine if you need, new donors every couple of days to try and supply that. It would be extremely logistically challenging. But I think more importantly is the variability that introduces. And we completely avoid that by being able to make all of the products that we need from the same original donations. We have a cell bank that has an essentially limitless capacity. So we'll just keep using the same starting material time and time again. And that really is a game changer.
What about the size of the prize? How big's the market that you're playing in, and how's it evolving? Is it a growing market? Is it a stagnant market? Where do you see the opportunity?
Yeah, so look, the market opportunities are enormous. So even if we look at the 4 conditions that we're already in clinical trials for, which I should emphasize, that is really a small subset of the potential, really, but that's what we're focused on right now. But those 4 markets on their own add up to an estimated $28 billion US annually. And even if we look at the very smallest of those markets by a long way, which is graft versus host disease, on our slide there, it looks tiny, but it's actually $600 million US annually is the addressable market. So the potential commercial opportunities here, even if we're successful in just one of these conditions, the commercial opportunities are absolutely enormous. And in terms of whether they're growing, I suppose it's good and bad news. They are growing, which is bad news, I guess, for humanity, in that most of these degenerative medical conditions are becoming bigger and bigger problems as time goes on. Diabetes is becoming a bigger problem. Osteoarthritis is becoming a bigger problem. So that's a huge challenge for society, but it's a huge opportunity for companies like us that have potential solutions to these problems. And I don't think there's any doubt that these markets will continue to grow.
Now, there was some mention in some of the previous announcements about a strategic review. Mm-hmm. What's the long-term vision and the strategic direction now you've been through that process?
Yeah, so that's correct. We conducted a strategic review in July, and the outcome of that really is that we are focused on those 4 clinical programs for now. And our direction, really what we're aiming to do, we have an out-licensing business model. So as you may be aware, the resources required to take a pharmaceutical type product all the way to market and then to actually market that, it requires enormous resources. And that's really what big pharma does very well. So what we're aiming to do is to generate the data that shows that these products are safe and effective, and then out-license them to larger partners. And what that means, though, really is that our potential revenue is not necessarily too far into the future. I mean, people often think, oh, well, you're in a phase 2 trial. You could be years away from getting this product on the market. But the reality is that we could be generating serious revenue way before that by out-licensing the product. And that really is what our aim is.
So maybe that brings me to my last question that's just come through. Can you highlight key priorities and objectives for the coming year? What should investors be focusing on?
Right. So we're seeking to complete recruitment in 2 of our clinical trials around about the end of this calendar year. And that's the diabetic foot ulcer trial and the osteoarthritis trial. And of course, completing recruitment is a major milestone, because that then pretty much locks in the timeline to when we're going to get results, which is what everybody is focused on. So there are 2 major milestones coming up. In addition to that, we should be commencing the renal transplant trial before the end of this calendar year. And then looking a bit further forward, in the middle of next year, we should be getting results from the diabetic foot ulcer trial. Towards the end of next year, completing recruitment in the GVHD trial, and then getting results from that trial around about the second half of 2025. So we've actually got a lot of milestones coming up.
As you say, a lot of milestones coming up. So clearly a company to put on the watch list and just follow with interest. So Kilian, thanks for your time. We look forward to following with interest.
Thank you very much, David.
Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Winlo, Managing Director of Emyria, ASX code EMD. Emyria is bringing together patients, clinicians, researchers, medical innovators, and investors to develop new treatments in neuroscience and mental health. To tell us more, I welcome Michael. Over to you.
Well, good morning. Thanks, David, and thanks for joining. Real pleasure to be sharing an update on our business and the really exciting work that we're doing in a field that's capturing the imagination right now, and that is psychedelic-assisted therapy. You can go to the next slide. And the one after this. Great. So Emyria's mission is to really change the standard for global mental health care. We do this with a really unique business model. We own and operate a set of clinical services that reach the nation. We invest heavily in data capture so we can learn with our patients, and we convert that data and revenues into R&D efforts to develop new treatments to tackle some of our major mental health conditions. You can go to the next slide, please. It's no question, really, no surprise that mental health is getting increasing attention as being a rising burden and cost to our health system. We also know that the capacity in the system to treat patients is really limited. 1 in 3 Australian psychologists have their books closed, and this number is actually higher for psychiatrists. And if you've ever had a loved one or a family member that you've tried to get healthcare through, with a mental health challenge, you can appreciate how difficult this can be. And so recently, there's been a tremendous amount of excitement around a new modality of treating mental health, particularly our most serious conditions. And that's psychedelic-assisted therapy. This is the administration of a psychedelic medicine given alongside skilled psychotherapy for patients. And what we're seeing from some of the most remarkable and well-run phase 3 trials is an incredible response rate in patients with major mental health challenges. Up to 80% of patients who underwent 3 sessions of MDMA-assisted therapy patients with PTSD had a clinically significant improvement in their symptoms, and around 70% no longer met the criteria for PTSD. So on the back of this growing body of evidence, regulators around the world are shifting their stance on these treatments. And Australia, believe it or not, is leading the world. In February this year, they announced legislation change to allow MDMA and psilocybin to be legal medicines prescribable by specially qualified specialists from July 1st this year for MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. Go to the next slide, please. So this puts Australia about a year ahead of the rest of the world on this. Now, Emyria's focus for the last couple of years, we've been working with partners to develop a model for MDMA-assisted therapy alongside our other clinical service efforts. MDMA, worth telling you a little bit about this. This is a really unique drug. We know this as ecstasy on the street, but I should mention that the ecstasy that you could get from your man on the street is quite commonly mislabeled and cut with other things. So what we're talking about here is medical grade, pharmaceutical grade MDMA. MDMA has these unique qualities in that it greatly releases serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline, the three primary neurotransmitters. And this leads to a really unique set of clinical features. It increases a sense of well-being and trust, sociability and extroversion. One stays alert and lucid, and it also decreases feelings of fear and defensiveness. And those qualities make it a very powerful adjunct for psychotherapy, particularly when you're dealing with really difficult subject matter like post-traumatic stress disorder. We can go to the next slide, please. And so MDMA is showing most promise for conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a challenge, a debilitating mental health condition that can occur following a traumatic event or a series of repeated exposures to difficult or challenging environment. It can lead to these set of debilitating symptoms that can affect quality of life and people's ability to function normally. The current treatment options are relatively broad, but there's very high rates of resistance. About 50% of patients develop a resistance to these common treatment options, and about 50% of patients also end up developing complex or severe PTSD. We can go to the next slide, please. So given in this backdrop, it's been incredibly promising to see some of the results from well-run large phase 3 studies conducted in the United States using MDMA-assisted therapy for patients with complex and severe PTSD. And what we've now seen from 2 major phase 3 trials is some incredible clinical outcomes. 86% of the most recent phase 3 completed and results released just last week showed that participants reported improvement compared to just 69% in the placebo group. Remarkably, though, 71% of participants in that MDMA-assisted therapy treatment arm no longer met the criteria for PTSD, compared to just 46% in the therapy-only group. And it's results like that that are capturing the imagination and prompting countries like Australia and soon to be the rest of the world to change their attitudes towards these treatments and to work with clinical partners like Emyria to figure out how can we get these treatments to patients who need them. If you go to the next slide, please. So Emyria's focus is on complex mental health disorders. We've treated a broad range of patients. We have a special interest in the anxiety disorders and with MDMA-assisted therapy focused very much on PTSD. How big can this market get? Well, just in Australia alone, there's about 1 million Australians suffering or experiencing PTSD in the last 12 months. About half of those have complex or treatment-resistant PTSD. And if we look at potential exclusions, we're still talking about 400,000 Australians that could be suitable for MDMA-assisted therapy. And if we started with just a very small percentage of those, we're looking at hundreds to thousands of patients that could have treatment, and that's our target group over the next year or so. You can go to the next slide, please. So what's needed today? Well, to deliver these treatments, we need the approval of an ethics committee, we need a special care model, we need specially qualified specialists, the support of a multidisciplinary team, fit for purpose clinics, and secure drug supply. And Emyria has all of that in place. If you think about what's needed tomorrow, though, we're going to need innovators in both delivery of care, new delivery models, but also improvements to the medications are quite likely to improve patient access and suitability. And so Emyria's unique set of capabilities that we've been developing over the last 4 years We run clinical services, we invest in data. We also have our in-house drug development team. We're uniquely set up to really lead and pioneer in this sector. Next slide, please. And so what's needed today? Well, we have a broad clinical service, which I'll explain in a moment, that allows us to have immediate patient impact, generate revenues and data that then can support the improvement of both these drugs and their delivery models. The data can also support cost-effective analysis and engagement with payers. And then if we look, we can then scale this through acquisitions, growth of our clinical services, but also our drug development programs, hold the promise of large venture returns through licenses and drug development deals. Next slide, please. So our clinical service footprint is quite broad. For many years, we've been running Emerald Clinics, a specialist GP-led service working with recently rescheduled cannabinoid medicines. We've treated more than 10,000 patients and have a very rich and deep data set that's also guided our own development of unique proprietary dose forms in the cannabinoid front. Recently, we acquired the PAC Center, a brilliant multidisciplinary clinical team specialized in the treatment and care of patients with psychological trauma. And so we've now added into our clinical service arm and broadened our clinical service footprint. We now work with psychiatrists, GPs, mental health nurses, psychologists, counselors, physical, social, and occupational therapists as well. And so we have a really broad clinical reach and the ideal wraparound clinical service to provide these promising and pioneering new treatments like MDMA-assisted therapy and more. You can go to the next slide, please. And by having that broad clinical service, we're now able to guide and ground our drug development programs based on the real-world data and real patient experience. For the last couple of years, we've been working in partnership with the University of Western Australia to make changes to that MDMA molecule to create MDMA analogues, a whole library of unique chemical entities for which we believe have promise for a whole range of neuropsychiatric conditions. We have 3 lead series which are progressing well. One series focused on making a shorter acting MDMA so we can turn that 10 or 12-hour treatment session into something more manageable and practical in a busy clinical practice. We have a lead series focused on tuning the selectivity of MDMA for specific neurotransmitters, and we're showing some great promise for the treatment of the symptoms of Parkinson's medication. And we also have other lead series focused on other specific neurotransmitter focused conditions, including some for fibrosis, given a specific action on the serotonin receptor. We'll go to the next slide, please. We've done this before because we've also had a history of developing proprietary cannabinoid dose forms based on our real-world data. We have 3 lead programs that are all in clinical stages, RX5 in phase 3 trials, and commercially partnered with Aspen Pharmacare Australia, pursuing an over-the-counter indication, and RX7 and 9 are a higher bioavailability, high potency dose forms, pursuing prescription indications, and they're in research programs with the National Institutes of Health. Go to the next slide, please. And so here's our business model. We run care delivery, treat thousands of patients with a broad clinical service. We also have a world-class data platform, allows us to learn from our patients. That provides a really solid foundation to do our drug development work, provides revenues and data, which then we put into our drug development programs. Next slide, please. And so we have multiple revenue streams through our clinical service arms, patient fees through clinical partners and licenses, but also opportunities to grow that through our other efforts as well. Final couple of slides, and then I can get into questions here. Obviously, we couldn't have such an ambitious plan without a really world-class global team of experts across care delivery, technology and data, and drug development. We go to the next slide, please. And that allows us, and also we've got a really terrific track record of accomplishment, caring for patients, doing drug development, making real patient impact, generating substantial revenues, and of course, growing this model nationally. Final slides, we can put a couple more here, got some milestone slides I encourage you to look at. And then finally, on the final slide coming up after this one here, just our key investment highlights here. Australia has the unique regulatory environment with changes like what's happening with psilocybin for a company like Emyria to exist and thrive. We're at the forefront of this pioneering new field of psychedelic assisted therapy. We've done it before with cannabinoids. We've also got a number of unique drug assets that we're developing alongside our clinical service ambitions as well, and a terrific team to pull it all together. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Michael. And we'll leave it on that slide just so that people can take that in while we do deal with a couple of questions. So I've got a cracker's come in, actually.
Okay.
With the analogy of cell shovels during a gold rush, when regarding psychedelic therapy, what aspect do you consider to be most equivalent to the shovel? Is it the current treatment, the supply manufacture of the medication, IP, or TGA, FDA approval for alternative treatments?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a couple of shovels needed here, and that's what makes this challenging. We need trained therapists. So there's some. Well, let's think through where the bottlenecks might be. One is, clinical teams are actually equipped and capable of doing this. So they need trained therapists. We need clinical services where there's the right combination of talent, psychiatrists and therapists co-working together to deliver these treatments. We also need secure drug supply as well. I think the drug supply will eventually become a commodity. I think the real challenge now will be in those clinical services. And so tooling up, allowing other clinicians who want to participate and get active into this space rapidly get skilled up and supported to provide this treatment is really where the key is. We saw that at the PAC Center. That's why we initially partnered with them 2 years ago. They needed what we had, which was skills with data, clinical trial design, drug management. And so I feel that we can play a really important role activating other clinical services in this space.
Just touching on the PAC Center, you recently acquired them, as you mentioned. What does that indicate, that acquisition indicate about the company's trajectory for both immediate impact and long-term global influence?
Yeah. So we really believe that the right way to provide these treatments is have the full suite of clinical services, the wraparound care model, because patients won't just come for psychedelics. We saw this in cannabis too. It's not just about giving patients access to a single treatment. It's about caring for their condition, treating their PTSD, treating their treatment-resistant depression, for example. They want to be well. They don't just want access to a single modality. So we want to be there before, during, and after the experimental treatments. And so PAC Center is our chance to create that wraparound model. We think that's the right kind of model to both prove the value of where these treatments sit in the care paradigm, for getting cost-effectiveness data, ultimately for engaging payers, which then can show that commercial model could work. So we want to show this clinical service model works, have it thriving, and then scale it nationally and hopefully internationally beyond that.
Thanks, Michael. We are out of time, unfortunately, but a great presentation and clearly a company to watch. So I'd urge investors to scan the QR code to jump in the Investor Hub and get more information about Emyria and what you're up to. Thanks for the presentation.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
I'd now like to introduce our last, but certainly not our least important presenter, Mark Leong, Executive Chairman of Osteopore Limited, ASX code OSX. Osteopore are the global leaders in regenerative solutions. Their bioabsorbable implant is the first of its kind to be successfully developed and commercialized for surgical use. Their implants are made of a bioabsorbable polymer that dissolves over time, leaving only natural, healthy bone. This reduces post-surgery complication rates significantly compared to permanent implants. Mark, we look forward to hearing more about it. Over to you.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks for having me. Happy to start the presentation. Next slide, please. Next. Osteopore is in the exciting regenerative medicine space. We specialize in tissue regeneration, and we regenerate hard tissues like bone and soft tissues like tendons and cartilage. We use the body's own regenerative abilities to regenerate it, to regrow its own tissue. We are the world's first company to actually have developed and commercialized 3D printed bioresorbable implants, which reduce complications in reconstructive surgeries. Next slide, please. We are in the regenerative medtech space. For those who know, it's shaping the future of medicine and science. It is a new era of healthcare. So I think this is a space that medical science is looking at. So it's a very important space to be in. Next slide, please. So this gives you a little bit of a background on what we're doing. Osteopore relies on our own proprietary 3D printers. We are pushing the boundaries of 3D printing. So to give you a general scope of 3D printing and how it evolved, at the start, 3D printers were used, as far as the medical side of things were concerned, used for surgical guides, printing models for surgical planning. and then you used it for permanent implants, printing, plastics and things like that, which is, surprise would be 1950s concept, permanent implants. So now it's an era of regenerative medicine, regenerative tissue. Our implants have a biomimetic structure, right? So coupled with our biomimetic structure and bioresorbable properties, we create the perfect environment for the body's own regenerative abilities to grow its cells, grow tissues, and regenerate whatever needs to be regenerated. So that's the boundary you're pushing towards. And to go through a bit further, what's after regenerative implants? Bioprinted tissues, and really far away, Star Trek stuff, you have printed organs. So that's the interesting 3D printed facilitated technology for regeneration. Next slide, please. This is just to show you the evolution of surgical implants. Before the 1950s, no implants. If you break a bone, if you lose a bone fragment, good luck. You wrap it around, you hope the bone regrows. And then come to the 1950s, we've got your permanent implants, which are your titaniums and your plastics. So now it's the era of your regenerative implants. Regenerative implants are here because traditional implants are not working. There is a lot of risks and complications associated with putting something foreign in your body, as you can understand. Next slide, please. So a little bit of our proprietary technology. Our implants have two unique features. One is bioresorbable, which means it dissolves harmlessly in your body over time. The second one is biomimetic, which means we mimic the microstructure of the tissue we're trying to regenerate. So if you lose a bone fragment from bone cancer or an accident, your body has a problem of bridging that gap. If it's a hairline crack, easy, the body will heal. But if you lose a fragment, the current standard of care is to use permanent implants. You put in a metal or plastic to bridge that gap, or you use bone grafts. Our solution is to use our 3D printed implants, standard shapes or customized shapes, put an implant where the gap is, and it provides the perfect environment for your own tissue regeneration. And whilst in the case of bones, while your bone goes through and over the implant dissolves. So to us, that's the ultimate solution, because essentially you are resetting the clock to what the bone was prior to the event. So that is why, next slide, please. We think our implant is the best solution. This provides you some statistics. If you use permanent implants, your metals and plastics, a lot of people are not aware. Over a 10-year period, you've got up to 1 in 3 chance of an inflammation, potentially going back for another surgery. If you use bone grafts, it's a little bit safer, but you still got up to 1 in 5 chance of going back and redoing the surgery as well. Our technology, on the back of 80,000 successful surgeries, has shown negligible complications, 0.01%. We quote 80,000, not that it is a world-beating number, but at 80,000 surgeries, it is statistically very significant. We are not talking about 10 cases with mice and rabbits, or 5 human trials, right? 80,000. So based on statistical significant information, the technology works. Next slide, please. Our technology is validated. We've got tier 1 approvals, US FDA, European CE mark, Australia TGAs, Singapore's HSA, and more. As mentioned, we have done a fair amount of surgeries to prove that the technology works. We have begun commercialization in earnest in the last 4 or 5 years. We have appointed distributors in more than 25 countries on every continent. Obviously, as a medtech company, we've got multiple IPs and trademarks protecting our technology. And we have got a lot of published papers describing the clinical outcomes and as well as our core technology. Next slide, please. As far as our applications are concerned, you can imagine head to toe, from your cranial, your skull, to your nose for rhinoplasties, to your long bones, orthopedics, and more. Next slide, please. As I've shared, we have done 80,000 surgeries, and we have done lots of the mundane stuff, right? Small cracks, small holes on the skull, and things like that. What's more is we have done several world's first life-changing surgeries. These are all reported in the Australian National News Network, Channel 7, Channel 9. A gentleman had a terrible motorcycle crash, has his skull crushed, used permanent implants. It became life-threatening and used our implants. And now he's having a new lease of life, taking part in swimming competitions. We have a gentleman who had bone cancer and lost half a jawbone. And I used a bone graft in this case. And the bone graft resorbed. And he used our implants, and now he has got his face structure back in place and having, again, a new lease of life. A young cancer patient, we helped her, we grew 15 cm of tibia. And the surgeons were astounded at the speed of recovery. And finally, a gentleman had a strange bout of a serious bacterial infection. His option was not permanent implants or bone grafts, it was amputation. He used our implants. We helped, we grew the world's longest 36 cm bone, a shin bone, a proper load-bearing bone. So this is the world's first surgeries we are doing. Next slide, please. We are a small company. We are based out of Singapore, listed in Australia, but we have a global footprint. We are in more than 25 countries. We've got tier 1 approvals in many markets. Next slide, please. As I've shared, Osteopore listed late 2019. At that time, for the entire 2019, our annual sales was 411,000. And looking at our revenue on a quarterly basis, last quarter, ended June this year, we did 587,000. So that shows you the growth. And if you see that we always managed to grow revenues organically, obviously during COVID and when there was an EU regulatory transition, there was slight dips, but we always shown we can grow revenue organically. And the context here is this. Osteopore runs a very lean and mean organization. We have a headcount of 30. So imagine 30 covers work on manufacturing, distribution, sales, marketing, regulatory approvals, applications, split that by departments. And we listed during a period where there was a lot of macro challenges, right? COVID lasted two over years. Elective surgeries were pushed back. So interactions with surgeons were pushed back. You got the Ukraine war, you got Silicon Valley, you got all sort of challenges. And in that space, I think we managed to grow revenues, which I think shows the strength of our technology and the team. Next slide, please. Our focus in 2024 is to continue growing revenues organically, as you can see. We are looking to grow through partnerships and M&A as well. If you check our announcements, you see us working with several interesting partners that helps us accelerate growth in certain areas. And because we really have approvals in the US and Europe, the next huge market is obviously China. And if you've got a Chinese strategy wrapped around that, we have China is a big market, it's a complex market. So we have decided to, as part of the strategy, to split our applications into specific little blocks and work with a curated partner for each specific block. And the last announcement, you see that we are working with a company called InnoVentures, which is a experienced partner in going to China. Their pedigree means that they have investors from Temasek, which is owned by the Singapore government. So this gives you insight into the quality of partners we are working with, which is a testament to the technology and the people behind it. Next slide, please. Beyond the growing bones, which obviously has hit the 2 applications, we are working on several blue sky related projects. One is the holy grail of tissue regeneration, which is faster bone regeneration. We are working with national science agencies, credible hospitals and universities on stem cells, on biologics, additives, to work to speed up regeneration. So imagine that something takes 6 months, takes 1-2 months. Beyond that, our technology can help you grow soft tissues, cartilage, tendons. And for that, we are making good headway. We have started in-human trials for shoulder rotator cuff tendon injuries. We have done knee repairs for professional sports players. So again, this is a very big market. You have soft tissue head to toe, right? We are addressing the OH and sports sports injuries markets as well. And finally, well, before you go into human, you go into animal data. So we got tons of animal studies and data on obviously bone repair, soft tissues repair. So the animal market is something that is we are looking at. You know, people spend more money on their pets than their loved ones. So you got your dogs, your cats, your race horses. Again, interesting market to look into. Next slide. So after us, you know, why Osteopore? I think regenerative medicine and medtech is a space that is not well understood easily by most people. And especially in the Australian context, you know, this is not mining. I often joke that if my implants were far underground, you know, it'd be easier. So I explain, for a medtech company, you want something that works, right? It's not could be on a petri dish, maybe it works, maybe not. You know, the clinical data is not there. Ours is fully validated. We've done 80,000 cases. We've got IP. We've done the mundane cases. We've done amazing world's first successful cases. We have done different things that it's, some people tell me are like a science track kind of stuff. Next slide. And ours is a global opportunity. Small company and us have really hit every continent. You know, application by application, the addressable markets are huge. We got tier 1 regulatory approvals. And we are not a one-trick pony, right? Beyond bone regeneration, we are looking towards soft tissues, the animal market, as well as speeding up tissue regeneration. So I think we tick a lot of boxes as far as regenerative medicine companies are concerned. David, this is end of the slides.
Thanks, Mark. Great presentation, and clearly a world-leading technology, which, going by the number of questions that have come through, have clearly captured the imagination and interest of a range of investors, both those existing and those looking to put you on their watch list. So let's get through as many as we can. The MOU with Inno Ventures, what does that mean in a practical sense for Osteopore, and where does it lead?
Well, I think we recognize the Chinese market as the second largest market that we have to get into. And going to China, it's a very complex process. You can't go in alone. So we have, as I mentioned earlier in the preso, we have identified specific applications and to work with specific partners. So for Inno Ventures, they had this particular interest in our orthopedics products, and the orthopedic products and the knee products are a huge market. They have the pedigree and the experience in going to China. So right now we've gotten a very, very strong partner to get into China. Again, to manage expectations, getting to China will be a 2 to 3, depending, even 4-year process, but we have to start. And I can't imagine working with a lesser partner than Inno Ventures.
Okay, so since IPO, the share price hasn't actually matched the operational activities and highlights. Is that something that you worry about, or do you just focus on the business and hope the share price matches by doing these sort of things and other communication opportunities to investors, but you know what the business is doing and you know what it can achieve?
David, we get asked these questions fairly often, and because of that, it's obviously on my mind. But on a day-to-day basis, we don't look at share price, right? We do have a medium to longer term strategy. I'll say this, right? I think it is a different environment to when it was 2019. 2019 didn't have all the events I mentioned, COVID wars and recessionary concerns and things like that. But I'll tell you this. When we listed in 2019, our sales were 411,000, and the last quarter was 590 compared to 411 for an entire year. When we got listed, we were in 10 countries. We are now in 25. We had one main product application, the skull. We now have 3, including rhinoplasties and dental. And our IP, which is very important, we had 1 IP. We now have 7. So in the last 3.5 years, as a young listed company in Australia, in challenging environments, running a very lean and mean group on a much lower resource base than the big boys in the space, I think we have achieved a lot. So I imagine over time, as the market understands what we are doing, I think the market will eventually see through the value and reward shareholders.
And in terms of the operational pivot towards China and the US, why has that occurred, and what do you see as the size of the opportunity?
Well, David, it's not exactly a pivot. US is obviously a market we have to look into. The good news is we've already gotten regulatory approvals and we are making headway into the market. People don't understand how complex getting into markets are, especially in the US, right? We are not yet at the level of the big boys like your Pfizers and your Johnson & Johnsons, your Medtronic and Strykers of the world with, ample resources. We have to go through the steps of getting regulatory approvals, talking to hospitals, committees, procurement, ethics, pricing, insurance. The good news is we have started getting orders from fairly well-known hospitals in the US. So we expect traction in the US, right? It is the biggest market. It understands medtech. And if we do well in the US, it means a lot of good news for the company, not least, from a commercial adoption to financial, right? Every big medical tech company has an interest in NASDAQ. So I think it ticks many boxes to be in the US. The next biggest market is China. Like China and US is about 20 to 25% of global market. And we cannot ignore the Chinese market. So that is why we are starting to have inroads into China, right? And we are trying to be proactive into keeping the market updated, because I think medtech, regenerative medtech, is again a very foreign business to most investors. So we are trying to be proactive in explaining out every step of the way the inroads into China. And the Chinese market is enormous, right? If we get these two markets right, I think we'll be doing very well.
There's a comment here from clearly an investor that you've got all the pieces in the right places. You've got all the right approvals. You've got the IP. You've got the track record. You've got all of the right things in place. And for them, their comment is they'd love to see revenue uptick quicker than it has been. But clearly, as you've mentioned, it's been growing exceptionally well. Is there a barrier? Is there a mental barrier for doctors, or is it something else that clinicians, there's a hurdle you've got to get them through for them to go, actually, now I get it, given most of them have been taught a historical way to deal with a number of the ailments and treatments that you're now providing a solution to?
Yeah, David, I think you have answers in your questions. Look, I think, as I described earlier, selling medical devices, putting things into the human body, it's not like selling Apple phones on Harvey Norman or cars on Toyotas and John Hughes, right? It is a very arduous process. Getting clinical data and regulatory approvals is tough work, which we have done. And now it's getting into hospitals, which I described, various committees, procurement, insurance, pricing, ethics. And then you got to talk to doctors. In this digital age, you'd be surprised, doctors still value one-on-one communication. And that's where we are working very hard to do that. I think, in all fairness, again, this sounds like, regurgitating, but in the last 3.5 years, considering what has happened in the macro environment, considering how lean and mean and the level of resources that we have, I think we have clearly punched above our weight, right? We are in a space where the big boys have curated relationships, deep relationships with the entire ecosystem head to tail. But we have, in a very short space of time, with very little people, with very little resources, managed to do many things. We have gotten regulatory approvals. We have entered the markets. The first sale is always the toughest. We have 25 countries already selling our products, albeit at the early stage. So it is a process. I imagine as the first few orders of these, brand name hospitals in the US get used, and we are 100% sure of the results being good, the recognition of the product will come, and then the take-up rate will come. We are in a space of growing bones. Putting it in a patient doesn't mean you get a good result tomorrow. It is monitoring for a couple of months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. So that is the incubation period. We are going against permanent implants that has a 70-year history. Almost every doctor that we are talking to hasn't used regenerative implants. So it is our job to put that to them. And when they start seeing the wonderful outcomes, I believe adoption will come.
And in terms of the products themselves, what are the products you're either close to or selling in the US?
We are currently selling our craniofacial products. So, your orbital floor, your skull. So that's already in the US market. We have 2 other product lines that we're working to introduce into the US over time, which is our rhinoplasty aesthetic product, as well as our dental implant-related products.
And in terms of, I'm not going to ask you to project a cash flow or a break even or any of those things, because that would get both you and me in trouble, which clearly we don't want to do. But if you look forward 3 years, you've achieved so much in 3 years, and the investors always want more. But if you fast forward 3 years and you look back and go, right, we've now been listed 6 years and this is what we've achieved, what would be some of the achievements you would be hoping to hang your hat on?
Well, David, we always have been working hard to build the economic moat of the company, right? Because we know how hard it is to get onto the market. We know, it's hard for somebody to jump in tomorrow. And we are in constant discussions. Whilst we grow organically, we are in constant discussions with strategic partners on many, many levels, on product collaboration, on technology, on investment, many different strategic partners on different levels of discussion. I like to see that in that time frame that you mentioned, we would have done considerable inroads in the US market because there is a gestation. We would have done some first sales into China, right? And if done right, I think that it would be an enormous market. And because of our ongoing discussions with several potential partners, I think you see us getting backed better with more resources to really push through our strategy. Right now, whatever I've shared that we achieve is done on a shoestring budget. And again, I like to emphasize, clearly we are punching above our weight class. So given time, given all the discussions we're having, I like to see good adoption. And not only that, right? I like to make headway into being able to say, not only we can help you regenerate the tissue naturally, we can do it faster. And we hope to be that one-stop shop. I know this sounds very cliche, where we fix your bones and we fix your cartilage and tendons as well. So that's what, fingers crossed, we'll see what happens to the company in the next 5 to 6 years.
And just reiterating, that is not a forecast. That is a goal that the company is looking to achieve, but definitely a goal.
Aspirations.
An aspiration
yes.
worth moving towards. And with the track record achieved to date, there's nothing to say that you can't reach those aspirations. But we'll watch with interest. Clearly, a lot of investors and those watching today have you on their watch list. So we look forward to watching your progress and as you move towards those aspirations. So Mark, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David.
As I said in my introduction, the purpose of this webinar series is to give you the opportunity to engage directly with your companies that are on your watch list and to give you ideas of companies you might want to potentially add to your watch list so you can follow them in the future. Do they hit the milestones they're hoping to achieve? So look at your watch list. Let us know if there are any companies on there that you want to hear from, or let us know about companies you've been thinking about adding to your watch list, and we'll get them to present to you in future. Contact Stuart Walters using the email address on the screen. Thank you to the presenters for making the time to present and to you for watching. Have a great day.